The stars were dim, and the air stank of desperation and burnt circuitry. Captain Lysander Conroy, looking like a man who'd lost a bet with a neutron star, scraped the grime off his boots on the threshold of the command deck. "Well," he sighed, greeting his crew with his usual charm, "I see we've managed to avoid solving any problems while I was gone." "Impressive. Just trying to keep the tradition alive, Captain," replied Zara, the ship's engineer, whose single-minded pursuit of sarcasm rivaled her knack for fixing things with duct tape and curses. She smirked, leaning against a console that seemed to have been designed purely to break the unwary shins of anyone over 5'9". The Ringworld was a marvel of engineering, if you were impressed by colossal architectural monuments to human folly. Somewhere between utopia and scrapyard, depending on which section you were unlucky enough to call home. Right now, it was tipping towards the scrapyard end of the spectrum, thanks to the Grinnesh, an alien species that couldn't decipher the human penchant for forgiveness. They saw it like a vegetarian sees bacon, a total mystery. "Status?" Conroy asked, hoping against hope for some good news. "Migration's a mess," said Malik, the navigator, with a resigned shrug. He had the air of someone who'd seen too many space horrors and was now mildly disappointed by anything less than an eldritch abomination hatching from the air vents. "And by mess, I mean it's a shitstorm. The Grinnesh are pushing in like they're late to a sale on human misery." "Ah, the Grinnesh," Conroy mused, running a hand through hair that hadn't seen a comb since the last ice age. "Nature's way of reminding us that life's too long and not nearly painful enough." "What's their latest grievance?" "Apparently they're upset we didn't greet them with more exploding fireworks and a red carpet," Zara quipped, her eyes rolling with the force of a small moon. "Turns out our survival wasn't the welcome they expected." "Survival's overrated," Conroy said, waving a dismissive hand. "So, suggestions?" "Besides praying to the gods of misfortune," Malik scratched his chin, the universal symbol of deep thought or mild itching. "We could try talking to them again. You know, with words and diplomacy instead of laser cannons." Zara snorted. "Diplomacy? You mean that thing we pretend to be good at so the Grinnesh can laugh in our faces before they try to vaporize us?" "Exactly," Malik replied with a grin that was more grimace than anything else. "It's not about winning, it's about losing with style." Conroy sighed, staring out at the endless expanse of space, which seemed like a good metaphor for the void between his ears at that moment. "All right, let's suit up and see if we can charm the Grinnesh into not destroying us today. Maybe they've developed a sense of humor. Or at least a sense of timing," Zara said dryly as they headed for the bridge, the familiar clatter of boots on metal deck plates sounding like a funeral march. The command center was a hive of activity, though closer inspection would reveal that most of the activity involved people pretending to be busy while praying not to be noticed by the captain. The Grinnesh fleet was visible on the main display, a menacing armada that looked like someone had weaponized a particularly angry swarm of bees. "Patch me through," Conroy said, taking his place in the captain's chair, which had all the comfort of a medieval torture device. "Let's see if we can't talk our way out of this." The screen flickered, revealing the Grinnesh leader, a creature that looked like a nightmare had mated with a tax audit. "Human," it hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "We tire of your endless delaying tactics." "Oh, I'm sorry," Conroy replied, plastering on his best diplomatic smile, which looked more like a nervous twitch. "We were just trying to figure out how to pronounce your name correctly. Didn't want to offend, you know." The Grinnesh leader didn't look amused, but then again, it was hard to tell with a face that seemed permanently set to murderous rage. "Your delay is unacceptable. Prepare for destruction," Conroy sighed theatrically. "Well, there goes my weekend plans. Look, can't we just skip to the part where you begrudgingly accept that we're too obnoxious to destroy and move on?" "Your attempts at humor are noted," the Grinnesh said, a sneer twisting its features. "But they will not save you." The transmission ended with all the finality of a guillotine's blade. "Well," Malik said, rubbing his temples, That went about as well as expected. On the bright side, they didn't shoot us instantly, Zara pointed out, her voice laced with irony. Yeah, Conroy said, standing up and stretching, trying to dispel the feeling of impending doom that clung to the air like an unwanted smell. But I got the distinct impression that vaporizing us is still on their to-do list. The crew exchanged weary glances, the kind that spoke of shared history and too many near-death experiences. So, Conroy said, clapping his hands together, the sound echoing around the silent bridge. Any other bright ideas before we're reduced to space dust? Well, Zara said slowly, a mischievous glint in her eye, we could always try the old hide-and-seek tactic. Worked when we were kids. Conroy chuckled. Yeah, but I don't think the Grinesh are going to close their eyes and count to 10. Malik leaned back, his chair creaking ominously. Maybe not, but we could try hiding in the asteroid belt. Risky, Conroy mused. The kind of risk that usually ends with explosions and screaming. Sounds like a Tuesday, Zara quipped. All right, Conroy nodded, making a decision. Let's see if we can find a cozy asteroid to hide behind. Give them the slip. Worst case, we buy ourselves a few more minutes to come up with a new terrible idea. With that, the crew got to work, the tension in the air palpable, like the moment before a disaster strikes. They navigated towards the asteroid belt, the ship's engines humming with a nervous energy, like a choir of anxious bees. You know, Malik said as they edged closer to the belt, I always thought I'd die in some grand, heroic way. Dying in an asteroid belt while running from angry aliens wasn't quite what I pictured. Heroic deaths are overrated, Zara replied, fingers dancing over the controls. You can't spend the afterlife bragging if you're dead. True, Conroy agreed, watching the asteroids loom larger on the main screen. Besides, who wants to be remembered as the idiot who got vaporized trying to be a hero? The ship slipped into the belt, weaving between the massive rocks with a grace that belied its age. The crew held their breath, waiting for the first sign of pursuit or, worse, the sickening crunch of metal meeting asteroid. So far, so good, Malik said, his voice tense with focus. Don't jinx it, Conroy warned, eyes fixed on the display watching for any hint of the Grinesh ships. The Grinesh, for all their bluster, seemed reluctant to follow them into the belt. Perhaps even they had some sense of self-preservation. Look, Zara said, pointing at the screen. They're holding back. Miracle of miracles, Conroy muttered, a grin tugging at his lips. Looks like we bought ourselves a little breathing room. But not for long, Malik added, his tone sobering. They'll regroup and come after us. It's just a matter of time. Then we'll have to outthink them, Conroy said, determination hardening his voice. And if that doesn't work, we'll out-crazy them. That's the spirit, Zara said with a chuckle. They settled into a temporary calm, the ship drifting amid the asteroids like a leaf on a breeze. The ticking clock loomed large in their minds, though, a constant reminder that their respite was as fragile as the peace they sought. All right, Conroy said, breaking the silence. Let's see what other tricks we've got up our sleeves. He looked around at his crew, mismatched and flawed, but each with a spark of brilliance that had kept them alive this long. We've faced worse, he added, his tone laced with the kind of gallows humor that was practically a crew in joke by now. Yeah, Malik said, nodding. Like that time we got caught in the middle of a civil war on Ganymede, or when we accidentally insulted that warlord on Betelgeuse, Zara added, a wry smile on her lips. Exactly, Conroy said, and we survived those by being clever, resourceful, and just a bit lucky. And if that fails, Malik asked, raising an eyebrow. Then we go down fighting, Conroy said, his voice firm. With style, of course. The crew laughed, the tension easing just a little. It was a laugh born of desperation, but it was laughter nonetheless, a defiant act in the face of the universe's indifference. As they prepared for the next phase of their plan, the ship nestled among the asteroids. Conroy couldn't shake the feeling that the real adventure was just beginning. Grim and uncertain as their situation was, There was a strange comfort in the camaraderie shared by those who had faced death together and lived to joke about it. "All right," Conroy said, steeling himself for whatever came next. "Let's show those Grinash bastards that humans may be forgiving but we're not pushovers." The crew nodded, resolved. Because when push came to shove, humanity had a tendency to shove back hard. The command center was buzzing like a nest of disgruntled hornets. Captain Lysander Conroy, a man whose patience could be measured in milliseconds, watched the chaos unfold from the comfort of his metal throne, a chair that might have been designed by someone who thought comfort was a sign of weakness. "All right, folks," Conroy called out, his voice carrying over the din. "We've got a Grinash fleet out there who think we're worth more as space debris than as awkward acquaintances. Let's see if we can't dissuade them." Zara, the ship's engineer who looked like she'd already lived through 3 lifetimes of bad choices, smirked as she adjusted her terminal. "Well, it's not like we can offer them tea and biscuits, right? Unless they like their snacks irradiated." "Ah yes, nothing says peace offering like a side of radiation poisoning," Conroy replied, leaning back and attempting to find some comfort in the pitiless chair. "Malik, what's our status?" Malik, the navigator who wore sarcasm like a second skin, glanced up from his controls. "We're nestled in this asteroid belt like a hermit crab in a borrowed shell. But those Grinash bastards are getting antsy." "Who can blame them?" Zara interjected, tapping her console with the air of someone who knew it was about to deliver bad news. "If I had an armada and nothing better to do, I'd be antsy too." Conroy sighed, contemplating the vastness of space and the unending series of terrible decisions that had brought him here. "All right, let's try something radical. Let's offer them peace." The bridge fell silent. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for the moment before an executioner's axe fell. Zara and Malik exchanged a glance that said, "He's finally lost it." "Peace," Zara repeated, as if the word was in a foreign language. "You want to offer peace to the species that considers friendly fire a sign of affection. Why not?" Conroy shrugged. "Worst case, they turn us into cosmic confetti anyway. Best case, they're confused long enough for us to make a run for it." Malik chuckled darkly. "Confusion tactics, I like it. It's like trying to bluff your way out of a bar fight with a pocket full of nothing." "Exactly," Conroy said, warming to his theme. "Send a message on all frequencies. Tell them we come in peace. Tell them whatever you want, just make it sound sincere." Zara rolled her eyes but complied, her fingers dancing over the console. "Message sent. I threw in a few pleasantries and a recipe for chocolate cake. Maybe the concept of dessert will baffle them." "Good thinking," Conroy nodded. "Everybody loves cake." Minutes ticked by, each one heavy with the potential for disaster. The crew waited, the tension palpable like the moments before a storm hits. Then the main display flickered to life, revealing the Grinash leader once more. If anything, it looked angrier, like a tax auditor who'd caught a whiff of a fraudulent deduction. "Human," it hissed, its voice grating like a blender full of gravel. "You speak of peace. Yet your actions prove otherwise." Conroy plastered on his most diplomatic smile, the kind that wouldn't convince a blind man he was sincere. "Ah, well, you know how it is. Transmissions get garbled, intentions get misunderstood. We're just a bunch of travelers trying not to get vaporized before lunch." The Grinash leader's face twisted into an expression that might have been confusion or constipation. "Your species confounds us. You speak of peace, yet you prepare for war. Explain." "Simple misunderstanding," Conroy said breezily. "You say tomato, we say please don't kill us. It's a cultural thing." A pause stretched so long it could have been measured in light years. The Grinash leader looked as if it was running complicated calculations on whether or not to believe the human's ridiculous claim. "We do not comprehend your motives," it finally said. "We are prepared to destroy you, yet you offer peace." "Well, you know what they say," Conroy replied. "It's better to be confusing than obliterated." The Grinash leader's sneer deepened, but before it could respond, the transmission cut off with the subtlety of a guillotine. "Well," Malik said, leaning back with a relieved sigh. "That went better than expected. Assuming their idea of better isn't just a bigger bang, Zara added, her voice dripping with irony. Conroy stood, stretching out the kinks in his back. All right, let's assume they're going to take a minute to scratch their heads and wonder what we're up to. Gives us time to figure out our next move. As the crew settled back into the uneasy routine of impending doom, Conroy found himself contemplating the vastness of the universe. It struck him as remarkably empty, save for the occasional asteroid, distant star, and hostile alien fleet. "Captain," Zara said, breaking into his reverie with the subtlety of a brick through a window. "Got a suggestion?" "Hit me," Conroy said, bracing for whatever madcap scheme she was about to propose. "We could try rerouting the energy reserves to create a decoy signal, make it look like we're preparing to jump to hyperspace." Conroy raised an eyebrow. "A decoy? That's got a snowball's chance in hell of working." "Exactly," Zara grinned. "That's why they'll never expect it." Malik chuckled. "It's like trying to sell ice to a Grinesh. Doesn't make sense, so it just might work." "All right," Conroy nodded, appreciating the oddball logic. "Let's do it." Malik, coordinate with Zara. "The rest of us will hold down the fort and keep our fingers crossed." As the crew got to work, Conroy couldn't help but feel a strange mix of excitement and dread. It was the kind of feeling that usually preceded either a spectacular success or a catastrophic failure. Within moments, the ship's systems hummed with renewed vigor, like an old engine that's just remembered it still has a few miles left in it. The decoy signal was set, and all they could do now was wait. "Let's hope the Grinesh have a soft spot for unexpected surprises," Conroy said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Malik glanced up from his terminal, a wry smile on his lips. "And if they don't, at least we get to go down in a blaze of glory." "Or a blaze of stupidity," Zara quipped. Time stretched on, each second an eternity, as they waited for the Grinesh to respond. The tension in the air was thick enough to slice with a knife, and Conroy found himself wondering if he'd missed his calling as a comedian in some cosmic comedy club. Finally, the main display flickered to life once more, the Grinesh leader's face filling the screen. It looked as if it had aged a century since their last encounter, though with an alien, it was hard to tell. "We have considered your actions," it said, its voice an unreadable mix of tones. "We do not understand your motives, but we will not attack at this time." Conroy blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected reprieve. "That's generous of you. Do not mistake this for weakness," the Grinesh leader warned. "We will continue to observe your actions." "Of course," Conroy replied, nodding as if this was all part of his master plan. "We'll be sure to keep the fireworks to a minimum." The transmission ended, leaving the crew staring at the blank screen, unsure whether to celebrate or brace for impact. "Well," Malik said, breaking the silence with a laugh that was more relief than humor. "Looks like we've bought ourselves some time." "Time to do what, though?" Zara asked, her expression a mix of triumph and trepidation. Conroy shrugged, a grin spreading across his face. "Time to think of an even crazier plan to keep them off our backs." As the crew settled into the relative calm, the sense of impending doom lifted just slightly, like a cloud parting to reveal a sliver of sky. For now they were alive, and in the grand scheme of things that was a small victory. "All right, team," Conroy said, his voice steady. "Let's use this time wisely. Who knows how long it'll be before they are breathing down our necks again." They nodded, each lost in their own thoughts of what the future might hold. But for now they were safe, and that was enough. "Here's to confusion," Conroy said, raising an imaginary glass. "The best weapon we've got." The crew laughed, a sound that echoed around the bridge. It was laughter tinged with uncertainty, but it was laughter nonetheless, a defiant act in a universe that seemed determined to crush them. And as they prepared for whatever came next, Conroy couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, they had a fighting chance. Lysander Conroy slouched deeper into his unforgiving metal throne, which, in a moment of wishful thinking, he'd hoped would morph into something more resembling a recliner. "Well," he muttered to no one in particular, I guess we'll just keep on spinning around this ring world until the Grinnesh decide they are either bored or hungry. At least we know we're not on their menu, came the dry quip from Malik, his eyes still glued to the navigation console. Though I'm not ruling out them deciding to barbecue us for the hell of it. Optimist, Zara chimed in from her own station, a wrench in one hand and an expression that suggested the universe had personally slighted her. I've just about made peace with the fact this ship's held together by duct tape and bad luck. Hey now, Conroy smirked, don't underestimate the power of duct tape. It's the closest thing to faith I've got. The ship hummed along its precarious path through the ring world, a miracle of engineering that now looked like a junkyard after a particularly violent tantrum. Once a marvel that promised endless possibilities, now it was more potholes and pitfalls than potential. Not that Conroy was feeling particularly poetic about it. Zara kicked a console panel back into place with a satisfying thud. We should have been scrapped years ago. Instead, we're still limping along like a one-legged dog in a marathon. Good thing we're stubborn, Malik offered, typing with one hand and sipping something suspiciously dark and likely unhealthy with the other. Otherwise, we'd have given up and let the Grinnesh have their way with us by now. Conroy snorted. And miss out on all the fun of dodging death every 5 minutes. Not a chance. While the humans bounced between gallows humor and grim determination, a subplot thicker than the ship's hull was brewing elsewhere. Virok, a Grinnesh spy with the dubious honor of possessing more cunning than his peers, had slithered his way into the shadowy corners of his species' command structure. His mission was simple: figure out why the humans hadn't been reduced to space dust yet. It turned out, even among a species as straightforward as the Grinnesh, there were factions. Some wanted to obliterate the humans just to see what color they'd explode in, while others, like Virok, were starting to wonder if this relentless aggression wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Explain to me, Virok hissed in the privacy of his quarters, why we persist with this charade. The humans are a curiosity. They've got a knack for survival that's almost admirable. Admirable? Sneered his colleague through the comms, a staticky mess of red and irritation. They're pests. We squash pests. And yet, Virok retorted, these pests are still here. Perhaps it's time we reconsider our methods. The conversation ended as all Grinnesh debates did, with unresolved tension and the promise of more explosions to come. Virok knew he was skating on thin ice, a concept that, ironically, held no meaning to a species from a planet devoid of water in any form. His descent might get him vaporized, but the humans had piqued something more than just his curiosity. Back on the human ship, the crew continued their dance of barely contained chaos. "All right, status check," Conroy called, knowing full well the answer wouldn't make him any happier. "What's working, what's broken, and what's on fire?" Zara ticked off a list on her fingers. "The engines are running, if you can call it that. The shields are holding, but just barely. And the coffee machines decided it's a popcorn maker," Conroy groaned. "Well, at least we won't starve." Malik swiveled in his chair, his expression a textbook example of exaggerated nonchalance. "And the Grinnesh?" "Still keeping their distance," Zara said, her gaze darting to a flickering screen displaying the aliens' last known coordinates. "I think they are as confused as we are." "Perfect," Conroy said with a sarcastic thumbs up. "Maybe if we're lucky they'll implode from sheer frustration." The ship shuddered, a reminder that luck was a fragile thing. Zara glanced at the controls, her expression turning serious. "Cap, we're burning through reserves faster than a birthday candle in a hurricane. We need a plan." Conroy rubbed his temples as if massaging out an idea. "I've got it. We fake a breakdown, make it look like we're dead in the water. The Grinnesh might think we're done for and leave us alone." "That's one hell of a gamble," Malik remarked. "If they call the bluff, we're screwed." "Or," Zara interjected, a glint of mischief in her eyes, "we could broadcast a distress signal. See if there's anyone else out there who's not interested in turning us into toast." "Right," Conroy nodded, adopting a tone that was equal parts hope and sarcasm. "Because the universe is just teeming with benevolent neighbors." Malik shrugged. Worth a shot. Worst comes to worst, we attract something more terrifying than the Grinash. That's the spirit, Conroy said, plastering on a grin that was more teeth than cheer. Let's get that signal going. If nothing else, it'll make us feel like we're doing something. Zara, ever the pragmatist, got to work, her fingers flying across the console with the kind of speed that suggested she was racing against more than just time. Malik kept an eye on their position, ready to improvise if the Grinash decided today was a good day for genocide. Distress signal ready, Zara announced. It's broadcasting on all frequencies. I even threw in a bit about being willing to trade for safe passage. Perfect, Conroy said. Let's see if anyone out there has a soft spot for desperate fools. They waited, tension coiling like a spring, each minute ripe with the potential for salvation or disaster. Conroy leaned back, wishing the chair was at least padded with something more forgiving than cold metal. Here's to hoping, Malik said, raising his cup in mock salute. May the void be kinder than our current company. As if on cue the comms crackled to life, a voice cutting through the static with surprising clarity. Unidentified vessel, we have received your distress signal. Identify yourselves and state the nature of your emergency. Conroy blinked, momentarily stunned that the universe had heard and answered. This is Captain Lysander Conroy of the SS Lamentable. We're a bit stuck and not in the lost our keys kind of way. Understood, Captain, the voice replied, carrying an accent that was both unfamiliar and oddly comforting. We are en route. Hold your position. Like we've got any other choice, Zara muttered. The crew exchanged glances, a flicker of hope sparking amid the gloom. They were still very much in the frying pan, but at least someone out there had decided to listen rather than shoot first and ask questions later. Well, Malik said, breaking the silence with a wry grin. Looks like we might have company. Let's hope they are the social type, Conroy said, trying not to picture the myriad ways this could go wrong. And not the kind that has us for dinner. While the humans held onto that tenuous thread of hope, Virok was busy questioning his life choices. As the dissent within the Grinash ranks grew louder, he found himself increasingly isolated. Despite the risk, he couldn't shake the feeling that these humans weren't just another problem to be exterminated. His instincts, honed by years of espionage and paranoia, told him that there was more to be gained through understanding than annihilation. But convincing the others would be a challenge worthy of legends, assuming he survived long enough to tell the tale. Back on the SS Lamentable, the minutes dragged by with excruciating slowness. Every creak of the hull and flicker of the lights was a reminder of how precarious their situation truly was. The only thing thicker than the tension was the layer of sarcasm keeping them afloat. Think they'll bring hors d'oeuvres, Zara joked, though her eyes betrayed a hint of anxiety. Maybe we'll get lucky, Malik said, and they'll have a soft spot for lost causes. Better than having a hard spot for target practice, Conroy added. The ship's sensors beeped, indicating the approach of another vessel. The screen filled with the image of a spaceship unlike any they'd seen before, sleek, efficient, and decidedly non-Grinash. This is Captain Lysander Conroy, he repeated, as much to reassure himself as to inform their visitors. We appreciate the assist. The alien captain appeared on the display, a figure whose presence radiated authority and, thankfully, no immediate malice. Captain Conroy, I am Commander Zell of the Viardran Alliance. We have received your signal and wish to assist. Glad to hear it, Conroy replied, grateful that relief seemed to be on the menu and not just anxiety. We could use all the help we can get. Then let us begin, Zell said, with a nod that suggested cooperation rather than conquest. As the Viardran vessel moved into position alongside them, the humans allowed themselves a moment of tentative optimism. They weren't out of the woods yet. In fact, they were nowhere near any semblance of safety. But at least for now, the universe had decided to give them a bit of a breather. And as they worked together with their new allies, Conroy couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, there were more surprises left in this grim twist of fate, and not all of them would end in disaster. "Here's to unexpected friendships," Conroy said, a hint of genuine hope in his voice. Malik raised his cup again, this time with a real smile. "To allies, even in the darkest of places." Zara just shook her head, the corners of her mouth curling up despite herself. She knew better than to count chickens before they hatched, or aliens before they didn't blast you to bits. But for once, she was willing to entertain the possibility that things might not end in flames. And as they continued their journey through the chaotic ringworld, the crew of the SS Lamentable resolved to make their next move count. After all, in a universe determined to crush them, they were still here, still kicking and still ready to fight another day. "Well, folks," Captain Lysander Conroy said, leaning back in the kind of chair that suggested someone had confused captain with masochist, "it seems our new friends the Viardran have decided to play nice. For now." Zara looked up from a bank of consoles that were more duct tape than tech. "Yeah, let's just hope they don't change their minds and decide to play let's see what humans look like on the inside." "Optimism, Zara," Conroy said, waving a hand like he was swatting flies. "We're practically swimming in it." The Viardran vessel hovered near their own decrepit ship, an elegant contrast to the flying rust bucket they called home. With its sleek lines and shimmering hull, it looked like the kind of ship that had smooth jazz piped through its corridors while you sipped cocktails. Conroy's ship was more heavy metal and indigestion. As the two ships synchronized systems, Malik leaned back, his swivel chair creaking ominously. "So what's the plan, oh fearless leader? Or are we just winging it like a first date? A bit of column A, a bit of column B," Conroy replied, rubbing his stubbly chin. "We'll let them help us patch up the ship, then see if we can't leverage this into a way to outfox the Grinash." "Speaking of those delightful sociopaths," Zara said, tapping at a flickering screen, "they're getting restless. Looks like they're gearing up for another round of poke the humans." "Marvelous," Conroy grumbled. "Just when I thought things couldn't get any more cheerful. The Grinash, apparently mistaking we're not shooting at you for we're plotting your demise, we're closing in like a pack of wolves circling a limping deer. Only in this case, the deer had a bad attitude and a penchant for risk-taking." "All right," Conroy said, standing up and assuming the kind of pose captains hoped looked inspiring but usually just emphasized their bad knees. "Let's throw them a curveball." Zara raised an eyebrow. "You mean the kind that misses and hits you in the face?" "Nope," Conroy replied with a grin that suggested he was all too familiar with the taste of defeat. "The kind that buys us time." Malik snorted. "Time to what?" "Die slower. Time to think," Conroy corrected, tapping his temple. "We play dead again. Didn't we try that already?" Malik asked, his tone dripping with skepticism like a leaky faucet. Conroy waved a dismissive hand. "They'll expect us to try something new, so we do the unexpected by doing the expected. Twice." Zara shrugged. "Crazy enough to work, but what about supplies?" "We're running low on just about everything except sarcasm." "Supply run," Conroy declared, as if it were the easiest thing in the universe. "We fake a breakdown, let the Grinash come in close, then slip out under their noses." "Ah, the all-hide-in-plain-sight trick," Malik said, nodding as if they hadn't tried similar harebrained schemes before. "Classic." Conroy flopped back into his metallic throne, the chair groaning in protest. "Zara, prepare the ship for a hard stop. Malik, plot us a course through the asteroid belt. We'll play space possum." "Captain, you're a mad genius," Zara said, though her voice made it sound like she was diagnosing a terminal condition. The ship's engines rumbled ominously as they powered down, the lights dimming to a murky twilight. The SS Lamentable, a name that fit like a second skin, drifted to a halt, the silence deafening but for the hum of the failing life support. "Now we wait," Conroy said, steepling his fingers as if he were planning world domination, rather than hoping not to become cosmic debris. They didn't have to wait long. The Grinash ships, each one an angular nightmare of spikes and menace, sidled up to the Lamentable like a gang of alley cats eyeing a wounded sparrow. predatory but not quite sure if it was worth the trouble. "Showtime," Malik said, his fingers flicking over the navigation controls. "Let's hope they fall for it." As the Grenache loomed closer, the SS Lamentable remained still, every system running on minimal power, the crew holding their collective breath. It was a gamble, but then again, their entire existence felt like one long, drawn-out bet against the universe. Zara kept her eyes on the monitors, tracking the Grenache movements with the kind of focus usually reserved for disarming bombs. "They're getting curious," she noted. "Either that or they're about to practice their idea of friendly fire." "Not today," Conroy muttered, watching the screens as if sheer willpower could keep the Grenache at bay. "Time to make our move." With a practiced hand, Malik nudged the controls, the ship's engines flickering to life in a whisper of power. In the void, subtlety was a survival trait, and they'd mastered the art of quiet escapes like it was a religion. The ship inched forward, slipping through the gaps in the Grenache formation like a shadow through cracks in a wall. It was painfully slow, agonizingly tense, and entirely dependent on the hope that the Grenache were too busy gloating to notice. "Steady," Conroy urged, his voice barely more than a whisper despite the lack of need for secrecy. "We're almost clear." The Grenache ships, perhaps too accustomed to their own bluster, seemed oblivious as the Lamentable crept past them, heading for the relative safety of the asteroid belt. It was a slow-motion escape, but it was working. "Well," Malik said, once the tension had broken like a fever, "that was entirely too close for comfort." "Comfort's overrated," Zara shot back, her eyes glued to the sensors. "We're alive, aren't we?" "By default," Conroy replied, his relief tempered by the realization of just how much longer they'd have to keep up the charade. "Let's not waste it." As the Lamentable slipped into the shadow of the asteroid belt, the Grenache finally seemed to notice their absence. Too little, too late, Conroy thought with a grim satisfaction. "We're clear," Malik announced, his tone a mix of disbelief and triumph. "Great," Conroy said. "Let's see how long we can keep this up before they realize they've been duped." Again, Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Well, Captain, you've bought us time. What's the next miracle?" "Miracle," Conroy echoed, a sardonic smile tugging at his lips. "We're fresh out, but we've got something better, human ingenuity." "Right," Malik said, settling back into his chair with a resigned air. "Because that's never gotten us into trouble before." As they navigated deeper into the asteroid belt, the crew allowed themselves a moment of respite. The Grenache were still out there, still a threat, but for now they'd managed to stay one step ahead. "Well, folks," Conroy said, raising an imaginary glass, "here's to not being dead." "Not yet anyway," Zara added, though there was a hint of a smile in her eyes. Malik just shook his head, a wry grin splitting his face. "And to the next crazy idea that keeps us breathing." As the ship continued its silent journey through the cosmos, the crew of the SS Lamentable knew their luck wouldn't hold out forever. But they were determined to make the most of it while it lasted. In a universe that seemed hell-bent on crushing them, they weren't just surviving, they were living to fight another day. And for Conroy, that was more than enough to keep going. The SS Lamentable didn't just look like it was held together with duct tape and sheer will. It actively confirmed that hypothesis every time the life support hiccuped or a console sparked like it was auditioning for fireworks night. Captain Lysander Conroy sat hunched on his metal throne, a chair so uncomfortable it seemed designed by someone with a personal vendetta against comfort. His crew, what was left of them, were scattered like debris across the command center. "All right, you lot of pessimistic reprobates," Conroy said, surveying his weary crew with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Let's have a chat about our current predicament." "Ah, yes," Malik remarked, voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that could strip paint. "Our fine tradition of perilous predicaments." Conroy let out a dry chuckle. "Tradition's important after all. Builds character and all that." The truth was, the SS Lamentable was limping more than sailing, and their supplies were running lower than a snake's morals. The Grenache were circling like vultures, and the Viadran aid was a distant memory, about as reliable as a politician's promise. Zara, sitting in front of a console that seemed held together by prayers and profanity, sighed. "We're basically a can of mystery meat floating through space." An apt metaphor, Conroy agreed. "Now let's focus on not becoming an all-you-can-eat buffet for the Grinesh." "Captain, hate to break it to you," Zara said, eyeing the dwindling energy readouts. "We're all out of clever tricks." "Good thing we've still got stupidity then," Malik quipped. "Something about it being infinite." "Great, then we'll lead with that," Conroy said, trying to muster enthusiasm from somewhere deeper than the pits of his soul. "First order of business, don't die, a classic plan," Zara said. "One might even call it foolproof." "Thank you for your unwavering confidence," Conroy replied, trying to ignore the fact that his chair seemed intent on rearranging his spine. "Could be worse," Malik said, though his tone suggested it was hard to imagine how. "We could be the Grinesh." "True," Conroy mused. "But they're not the ones currently on a crash course with starvation." The mood was bleaker than a black hole's basement, which was saying something. Conroy knew he needed to shake things up before the crew's despair turned into something uglier, like mutiny, or worse, poetry. "Okay," Conroy said, forcing his voice into a semblance of authority. "Let's do a full inventory. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. And when we find out we've got nothing but lint and bad decisions," Malik asked, eyebrows arching sardonically. "Then we'll improvise," Conroy replied with forced cheer. "We're good at that." Zara turned away from her console, her expression suggesting someone had asked her to wrestle a grizzly bear in a tutu. "You do realize our chances of survival are?" "Well, they're not great." "Optimism, Zara," Conroy said brightly. "It's like despair, but with a better backstory." The inventory, unsurprisingly, painted a picture so grim it might as well have been monochrome. The food stores were down to the kind of rations that weren't so much meals as punishments. The water was about as fresh as a politician's promise, and the air recyclers were on a first-name basis with failure. "Well, that's depressing," Malik said, closing the report with a snap. "Anyone else feel like we're the punchline to a cosmic joke?" "The universe does have a wicked sense of humor," Zara agreed, her fingers drumming a rhythm of stress against the console. Conroy leaned back, trying to ignore the chair's attempts to puncture his kidneys. "Then let's prove we've got a better punchline." It was bravado, of course, but bravado was all they had left. That, and a dwindling supply of oxygen, which seemed to be running out faster than their patience. The Grinesh were out there somewhere, preparing for a final assault. They'd sensed weakness, or maybe just wanted to see what humans looked like as decorative splats across the cosmos. "Looks like the Grinesh are gearing up for their grand finale," Zara said, scanning the incoming data with the concentration of someone defusing a live grenade. "Think they'll give us a standing ovation?" Malik asked, leaning back in his chair, which responded with a creak that suggested imminent collapse. "Only if we blow up spectacularly," Zara replied, a grin tugging at her lips despite the direness of their situation. Conroy got to his feet, the motion more of a creak than a leap. "All right, we need ideas. Wild, crazy, possibly suicidal ideas. No shortage of those here," Malik said, a grim smile playing across his face. "We could always fake a surrender." "Tempting," Conroy said, "except the Grinesh don't know the word. For them, it's more like, please disembowel us at your leisure." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that filled spaces where hope had once been. Conroy could feel the weight of their predicament settling over him like a suffocating blanket, but he also knew the crew would follow him to hell and back if he just gave them a reason. "All right," Conroy said finally. "We won't go down without a fight." "Not today." A flicker of something hope maybe sparked in Zara's eyes. "You've got a plan, sort of," Conroy admitted. "It involves a lot of running and a dash of blind luck." "In other words," Malik said, "business as usual." "Exactly," Conroy said, clapping his hands together. "Malik, get us a course. Zara, see if you can coax a bit more juice out of the engines." "You got it," Zara said, rolling her sleeves up. "Let's see if we can't duct tape our way out of this one." The ship shuddered as the engines roared to life, a sound like an old beast awakening, groaning and growling. The SS Lamentable leapt forward, its rusted frame protesting the indignity of movement. Conroy watched the screens, feeling the familiar thrill of being on the edge of the abyss. "Come on, you rust bucket, show them what you're made of." It was like asking a corpse to dance, but somehow, despite the odds, the ship responded. The Grenache ships were closing in, their angular forms a menacing wall of intent. "Here they come," Zara said, her fingers flying over the console. "Time for the magic trick." "Magic trick," Malik echoed. "I hope it doesn't involve sawing us in half." Conroy grinned. "Only metaphorically. Remember, we're the distraction." The Grenache, perhaps too confident in their superiority, moved in for the kill. But the Lamentable had a trick or two left, and as it spun and weaved through the void, even Conroy had to admit it looked almost graceful in its desperation. "Let's give them a show," Conroy said, his voice tight with adrenaline. "Something to remember us by." The ship danced through the stars, an improbable ballet of metal and madness. The Grenache, momentarily caught off guard by the audacity of the maneuver, hesitated. "Did we just confuse them?" Malik asked, watching the screens with a mixture of disbelief and delight. "Looks like it," Zara said. "Now's our chance." Conroy nodded. "Time to make our exit." Full speed ahead. The engines screamed in protest, but the Lamentable surged forward, tearing through the void like a comet with a death wish. The Grenache, recovering from their shock, gave chase, their ships closing in with the inevitability of a bad decision. "Almost there," Conroy said, the tension in the air thick enough to choke on. "Hold together, old girl." The ship shuddered. Every bolt and seam stretched to its limit, but it plowed forward, a battered warrior refusing to yield. "Now!" Conroy shouted, and Zara hit the controls with all the enthusiasm of someone slapping an unruly child. The Lamentable veered sharply, diving into the asteroid belt with the kind of reckless abandon usually reserved for suicidal gestures. The Grenache followed, their ships tearing through the debris field with grim determination. "Did we lose them?" Malik asked, hope edging into his voice. Conroy watched the screens, a predator's smile on his face. "Not yet, but let's see how they handle an old classic." He nodded to Zara, who punched the ship systems hard enough to make them groan. The Lamentable spun, its bulk smashing through the asteroids with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball at a wedding. The Grenache, caught in the maelstrom of debris, struggled to maintain formation. Conroy watched as their ships faltered, the chaos of the belt their undoing. "Looks like we bought ourselves some breathing room," Conroy said, his voice a mix of relief and disbelief. "For now," Zara said, though there was a grin on her face. "But it's going to take more than that to keep them off our tails." Conroy nodded, feeling the weight of their survival settling onto his shoulders once more. "Then we'll have to come up with something even crazier." Malik chuckled, the sound rich with the absurdity of their situation. "Captain, if there's one thing we're good at, it's crazy." As the SS Lamentable continued its journey through the stars, battered but unbowed, Conroy knew the fight wasn't over. But for now, they'd won a small victory, and in a universe intent on crushing them, that was something worth holding onto. And so, with a grim determination, they set their sights on the future, ready to face whatever new insanity the cosmos had in store. "To not being dead," Conroy said, raising a non-existent glass. "Not yet anyway," Zara added, her smile a beacon in the darkness. And as the stars stretched out before them, the crew of the SS Lamentable knew that whatever happened next, they'd face it together, with the same irreverent defiance that had kept them alive this long. After all, in a universe as dark as this one, it was the light of human stubbornness that burned brightest. "Here's to the next crazy idea," Malik said, echoing the sentiment with a grin. And with that they plunged ahead into the unknown, ready for whatever came next. The SS Lamentable limped through space like a drunk staggering home after last call, engines wheezing and hull groaning. Captain Lysander Conroy leaned back in his metal throne, which had the comfort of a porcupine's embrace. "All right, folks," he said, squinting at the flickering screen in front of him. We've bought ourselves a little breathing room, but let's not get cocky. Zara, hunched over a console that seemed to be more sparks than functioning tech, snorted. Cocky. Last time I checked, we were still stuck in a glorified tin can, with a life expectancy shorter than a snowflake in hell. Malik, lounging in his chair with the casual grace of someone who knew exactly how precarious their situation was, smirked. At least hell's nice and toasty. Better than freezing our tails off out here. Conroy shook his head, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. If we make it out of this alive, I swear I'm investing in a better ship, or a coffin, whichever comes first. The ship shuddered, as if offended by the notion of being replaced. Conroy resisted the urge to apologize to the heap of bolts that had somehow become their unlikely savior. Captain, Zara said, her voice cutting through the camaraderie like a scalpel, we've got a situation brewing. Another one, Malik drawled. Didn't we fill our quota for today? Conroy leaned forward, the movement eliciting yet another groan from his beleaguered chair. What's up, Zara? The Grinesh are regrouping, she said, eyes fixed on the monitor. And it looks like they've got reinforcements. A collective groan rippled through the command center, the kind that accompanies bad news and dental appointments. Conroy rubbed his temples, trying to stave off the headache that was steadily gaining momentum. How long do we have? Not long, Zara replied. But there's something else. I've been picking up some weird signals, like someone trying to communicate, on our frequency. Malik raised an eyebrow. Unless it's someone offering us a ride out here, I'm not interested. Zara shot him a withering look. It's not just noise, Malik. It's a Grinesh signal. Conroy's interest peaked, though he kept his expression guarded. You think it's one of their ships, or someone on the inside? She tapped a few buttons, and the console responded with a series of beeps that sounded suspiciously like a digital hiccup. That's the thing. These signals are encrypted, but not in the usual way. It's different good or different bad, Malik asked, with the air of someone who had learned to expect the worst. Different interesting, Zara said, with a hint of intrigue that Conroy hadn't heard in quite a while. Like someone hacked it for us. Conroy's eyes narrowed as he considered the possibilities. Could it be a trap? More like an invitation, Zara said, her fingers dancing over the keys as she tried to unscramble the riddle. The room filled with the tense silence of anticipation, broken only by the ship's gentle hum and the occasional metallic clank from somewhere deep within its bowels. All right, Conroy said, making a decision. Broadcast a response. Let's see if this mystery correspondent has anything useful to say. Zara did as instructed, her face a mask of concentration. The seconds ticked by, pregnant with uncertainty, until finally the console emitted a chime that startled them all. Malik exhaled sharply, his skepticism giving way to curiosity. What have we got? Zara's eyes widened as she deciphered the incoming message. Captain, you're not going to believe this. Try me, Conroy said, bracing himself for whatever bizarre twist fate had concocted this time. It's a message from a Grinesh calling himself. Virok, Malik scoffed. Great, just what we need, another Grinesh in the mix. Hold on, Zara said, voice urgent. He's offering information, says he's seen the light, whatever that means. Conroy's brow furrowed. A Grinesh defector. That's unprecedented. Unprecedented or just another Grinesh mind game? Malik asked, his tone as barbed as a cactus. We've got nothing to lose by finding out, Conroy said, already formulating a plan. Zara, see if you can get a secure connection going. I want to talk to this Virok. The ship's comms crackled to life, the sound as comforting as a dentist's drill. After a few tense moments, a voice emerged, gravelly and alien yet tinged with something almost human. Greetings, Captain Conroy, Virok said, his tone slightly stilted but earnest. I am Virok of the Grinesh I seek. Asylum. Malik snorted. Of all the things we've got to offer, asylum's the least valuable. Quiet, Conroy said, focusing on the transmission. Why come to us, Virok? There was a pause, the kind that suggested careful consideration. I have witnessed human compassion. For a species so fragile, you exhibit remarkable strength. Conroy couldn't help but grin, though there was no humor in it. "Yeah, we're tough cookies. Now what's your angle? Why help us?" "I wish to survive," Virok admitted, the truth laid bare in his words. The Grinesh leadership cannot comprehend the power of mercy. They see kindness as weakness, but I have learned differently. Zara's fingers danced over the console, analyzing Virok's signal for any trace of duplicity. "It checks out, Captain. He's not lying." Conroy nodded, considering the ramifications. A Grinesh defector could provide a wealth of intelligence, the kind that might just tip the scales in their favor. "All right, Virok," he said, meeting Zara's gaze with a nod. "We'll grant you asylum, but you'll have to earn it. What do you have for us?" There was another pause, filled with the crackling static of anticipation. "I can provide tactical data. The Grinesh fleet's weaknesses, their command structure. All I require is sanctuary." Malik crossed his arms, clearly unconvinced. "And what if this is all just a clever trick? How do we know we can trust you?" Virok's response was immediate, his voice tinged with a sincerity that surprised even Conroy. "Because I have no choice. The Grinesh have discarded me. To them I am already dead." Conroy exchanged a glance with his crew. This was an opportunity they couldn't afford to ignore, however risky it might be. "All right, Virok, you've got a deal. Send us the data, and we'll figure out the rest." The transmission ended, leaving the crew to digest the turn of events. Zara's console began to fill with streams of information, the kind of tactical intelligence that could change their fortunes. "Looks like we've got ourselves an unexpected ally," Zara said, her expression a mix of disbelief and hope. "And just in time, too," Conroy replied, feeling the spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time: optimism. "Let's see what this data can do for us." As they sifted through the information, the mood in the command center shifted from grim determination to cautious optimism. Virok's data was comprehensive, detailing everything from fleet movements to supply routes, and even the Grinesh's internal squabbles. "This is more than we could have hoped for," Conroy said, studying the data with an intensity that bordered on obsession. "With this, we might actually have a fighting chance. Or we've just been handed a front row ticket to our own funeral," Malik muttered, but even he couldn't hide the glimmer of hope in his eyes. Zara, ever the pragmatist, was already formulating a plan. "We need to make this data count. If we can hit them where it hurts, we might just buy ourselves enough time to escape. Or turn the tide," Conroy said, a dangerous idea forming in his mind. "If we play our cards right, we could even outmaneuver them." Malik shook his head, a reluctant smile on his lips. "Captain, you're either a genius or a madman. Haven't decided which yet." "Well," Conroy replied, grinning despite himself, "here's hoping it's the former. Now let's get to work." With renewed purpose, the crew of the SS Lamentable dove into the task of turning their newfound intelligence into a tangible advantage. It was a race against time, with the Grinesh bearing down on them and the clock ticking relentlessly in the background. But for the first time in what felt like forever, they had something more than desperation fueling them. They had hope, a fragile, flickering thing, but a light in the darkness nonetheless. And as they prepared for the fight ahead, Conroy couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. They were still the underdogs, still the misfits clinging to survival by their fingernails. But now they had a chance, a slim one, but a chance all the same. "To crazy ideas," Conroy said, echoing their earlier toast with a grin. "To not being dead," Zara added, her voice filled with determination. "And to surviving the impossible," Malik finished, his sarcasm giving way to something akin to camaraderie. Together they turned their ship, their hopes, and their newfound defector ally toward the impending storm, ready to face whatever fresh madness the universe had in store. With Virok's information as their guide, the SS Lamentable once again surged into the void, battered but unbroken, a testament to the resilience of those too stubborn, or foolish, to give up. The SS Lamentable creaked its objection as Captain Lysander Conroy steered it through the asteroid belt with all the grace of a drunk stumbling through a minefield. The ship's engines wheezed like an asthmatic chain smoker, but somehow they held together, propelled by little more than duct tape and hope. "Remind me again how this tin can is still flying," Malik asked, lounging in his chair with the casual indifference of someone who'd accepted his impending doom. Conroy smirked, his eyes on the flickering readouts. "Sheer bloody-mindedness, I expect." Zara, hunched over her console which was more sparks than tech, chimed in. "Don't forget the duct tape. It's holding this marriage of convenience together." The crew shared a grim chuckle, the kind that usually precedes a last stand or a really bad joke. They were outgunned, outclassed, and as usual, a hair's breadth from catastrophe. But they had a trump card. Virok's intelligence was a game-changer, a map of weaknesses they could exploit like a skeleton key to the Grinash's overconfident fortress. The tricky part would be convincing the Grinash leaders to listen to reason, a concept as foreign to them as a salad bar on a greaseball planet. "All right, team," Conroy said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We're going to give those Grinash a lesson in human resilience. And if we fail, well, we'll at least have a front row seat to our own fiery demise." "Optimism, thy name is Conroy," Malik quipped, but his smirk couldn't hide the spark of determination in his eyes. The comms crackled to life and Virok's gravelly voice emerged, an unexpected lifeline in a churning sea of hopelessness. "Captain Conroy, the Grinash leaders are not accustomed to your methods. They will perceive any approach as a challenge. Prepare yourself." "Challenge accepted," Conroy replied, his tone as dry as a desert planet's martini. The ringworld loomed ahead, a massive structure that was more scrapyard than sanctuary, thanks to the Grinash's peculiar idea of friendly fire. It was here they'd confront the Grinash, and with any luck not end up as space debris. Zara was already working her console magic, scanning for the Grinash fleet. "Got him," she said, tapping the screen. "They're clustered around the central hub. It's like they're expecting a parade or a massacre." "Let's aim for the former," Conroy said, steering the Lamentable into the heart of the hornet's nest. "Malik, you ready?" "Ready as I'll ever be to convince a bunch of alien warlords that hugging it out is the way forward," Malik replied, sarcasm dripping from every word. The Lamentable shuddered as they approached the Grinash fleet, an assemblage of ships that looked like an art critic's fever dream, all angles and spikes, designed to intimidate rather than inspire. "Broadcasting now," Zara announced, her fingers dancing over the keys with practiced ease. "Let's hope they are in the mood for a chat." The screen filled with an image of the Grinash leaders, their massive forms dwarfing the cramped confines of the Lamentable's bridge. They were a collection of scales, teeth, and bad attitudes, each one looking more displeased than the last. "Human," one of them growled, its voice like gravel in a blender. "You dare intrude upon our domain." Conroy leaned back, exuding a confidence he didn't feel. "I figured it was time we had a little talk, before you blow us to bits." A tense silence followed, the kind that usually preceded large explosions or incredibly awkward dinner parties. Conroy took the opportunity to continue. "We've got intel on your weaknesses. Courtesy of one of your own." He paused for effect. "But instead of using it to slaughter you, I'm offering you a chance to stand down. Call it a gesture of good faith." Malik whispered over his shoulder, "Good faith? Are we trying to bore them to death?" The Grinash leader's eyes narrowed, suspicion etched into every scale. "And why would you show mercy? What treachery is this?" "Simple," Conroy said, his voice steady. "You see kindness as weakness, but it's not. It takes strength to forgive, to offer a hand instead of a fist." Another Grinash leader snorted, a sound that could strip paint. "You are weak, human. Your mercy is a lie, a deception." Conroy grinned, the kind of smile usually reserved for situations just shy of hopeless. "Believe what you want, but your reinforcements are spread thin, your supply lines vulnerable. You attack, you lose. Stand down and we all walk away." Virok's voice cut through the tension, his presence a surprise to the Grinash. "He speaks true. I have seen this. Strength. We are not invincible. Perhaps it is time to listen." The room fell silent once more, the weight of Virok's words hanging heavy in the air. The Grenache leaders exchanged glances, their fierce expressions betraying the first flickers of doubt. "How do we know you will not betray us?" Another leader demanded, its voice a low rumble. "You don't," Conroy admitted, his honesty as sharp as a knife. "But trust is a two-way street. You take a leap of faith or you risk losing everything." More silence, stretched taut as a wire. Then slowly one of the Grenache inclined its massive head, a gesture of consideration, if not yet concession. "Your terms," it rumbled, the words grudging but not dismissive. "Simple," Conroy said. "You pull back, leave the ring world. In return, we hold our fire and share the path to peace." The Grenache exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. It was a gamble, a long shot, but Conroy had always been one to bet on long shots when the stakes were high enough. Finally, the leader spoke. "We will." Deliberate, the screen blinked off, leaving the crew of the Lamentable alone with their doubts and the ticking clock of fate. "Well, that went better than expected," Zara said, her voice tinged with relief. "Or worse," Malik added with a shrug. "Depends if you like your aliens char-grilled." Conroy leaned back, exhaustion nipping at his edges. "Let's hope they see reason. Otherwise, I hear space is lovely this time of year." The minutes dragged by, each one a small eternity as the Lamentable hovered in the ringworld's shadow. The crew busied themselves with preparations, their minds occupied with the myriad of ways this could all go sideways. Then finally, the comms crackled to life once more. "Human," the Grenache leader's voice echoed, a grudging respect lacing its tone. "We have considered your proposal. We will withdraw, but know this, trust once betrayed is not easily won again." Conroy nodded, a wry smile playing on his lips. "Understood. You won't regret this." The transmission ended, leaving the crew of the Lamentable to bask in the momentary victory. They had managed the impossible, convincing a species that prized aggression and domination to stand down with nothing more than words and the promise of a future unshackled from perpetual conflict. Malik exhaled, a mix of relief and disbelief. "Guess that makes us peace ambassadors." "Who'd have thought?" Zara smirked, her fingers already dancing over the console to ensure the Grenache retreat was genuine. Just another day in the void. Conroy stood, stretching the tension from his bones. "Let's get out of here before they change their minds." As the Lamentable turned away from the ring world, the weight of their narrow escape began to lift. They'd faced down an alien armada and walked away with something more than survival. They'd gained a fragile peace, and the knowledge that sometimes, against all odds, hope could triumph over chaos. "To surviving the impossible," Conroy toasted, echoing their earlier sentiment. "And to not being a smear on the side of an asteroid," Zara added, her grin infectious. Malik chuckled, raising an imaginary glass. "And here's to those crazy enough to think they can change the galaxy with a few kind words." Together, they sailed into the vast expanse of space, the SS Lamentable a testament to the indomitable human spirit, a bit battered, a bit bruised, but unyielding and ever hopeful in the face of the unknown. "So, anyone else surprised we're not pieces of space confetti?" Malik asked, lounging in his seat like he'd just saved the universe single-handedly. Conroy drummed his fingers on the armrest of his uncomfortable metal throne, because who needs padding when you've got authority, right? "Honestly, I was expecting our atoms to be scattered across the galaxy by now." "Shows what I know." Zara's console was behaving itself for once, more screen and less sparks. "Yeah, well, don't get too comfortable. The universe has a way of kicking you in the teeth the moment you think things are looking up. Comfort is for the weak," Conroy said, echoing the ship's design philosophy. "Besides, we're not done yet." The Grenache agreed to pull back, but that just means they're watching us even more closely now. The Lamentable trundled along, a battered testament to humanity's stubborn refusal to die quietly. The Grenache fleet was doing what could optimistically be described as retreating, but more cynically as repositioning to keep an eye on their suddenly less HFY human neighbors. "So, what's the plan now, Captain?" Zara asked, her gaze fixed on the radar. Besides praying they don't realize they could probably crush us by sneezing in our general direction. The plan, Conroy said with a dry grin, is to keep breathing and see where this weird twist of fate takes us. Ah, yes, the classic not dying strategy, Malik nodded sagely. Always a crowd pleaser. The comms crackled again, not with the promise of doom, but with the voice of Virok, their unlikely ally in this improbable diplomatic maneuver. Captain Conroy, Grinash Command has agreed to a joint meeting on the Ringworld. They wish to discuss cooperation. Cooperation, huh? Malik raised an eyebrow. Sounds like they're finally realizing that killing isn't the only way to solve problems. Or they've run out of other options, Zara said, her voice carrying the familiar weight of skepticism. Either way, better than being vaporized. True, Conroy replied. Let's not look a gift alien in the mouth. Besides, we've got our own mess to sort out. The Ringworld's been through hell, and it's going to take more than a quick patch job to set it right. The Ringworld in question loomed ahead, still mostly scrapyard with a hint of civilization trying to peek through the chaos. The Grinash and the humans, natural enemies turned tentative allies, would have to set aside centuries of mistrust to piece it back together, or at least not tear each other apart in the process. All right, crew, Conroy said, rising with the kind of authority that comes from knowing everyone else is just as clueless. Let's head to the meeting and see if we can't all play nice for a change. The Lamentable docked at the battered remnants of what had once been a bustling hub on the Ringworld. Now, it was a meeting place for those daring enough, or desperate enough, to attempt something new. They disembarked, Conroy leading the way, flanked by Zara and Malik. Virok awaited them, standing with a group of Grinash representatives. The air was tense, like a school reunion where everyone's still holding grudges from third grade. Welcome, humans, one of the Grinash rumbled, its tone almost civil. We meet in the spirit of mutual benefit. Fancy words for a bunch of folks who were trying to kill us not too long ago, Malik muttered under his breath. Let's not dwell on past misunderstandings, Conroy said, shooting a warning glance at Malik. We're here to build a future, not rehash the past. The Grinash leader nodded. Agreed. The Ringworld is damaged. We have resources, you have ingenuity. Nice way of saying we're good at fixing what you broke, Zara quipped, earning a few irritated glances from the Grinash. Virok stepped forward, the middle ground between two worlds. We must focus on repairing the infrastructure. Together, we can stabilize the Ringworld and ensure it serves both our peoples. Sounds like a plan, Conroy said. We start with the basics, life support, communication systems, maybe even some decorative touches if we're feeling fancy. The Grinash leader grunted, which Conroy decided to interpret as agreement. We will allocate resources, coordinate efforts. Peace is fragile but necessary. Look at us, Malik said with a sarcastic grin. Building bridges instead of burning them. What's next? Sharing recipes. Don't push your luck, Zara replied, though her smile betrayed her agreement. As they hashed out the details, a sense of cautious optimism began to take root. It was fragile like a flower in the desert, but it was there and it was growing. The Ringworld, once a symbol of division and conflict, was slowly transforming into a beacon of cooperation. It was a hell of a task, but Conroy and his ragtag crew were no strangers to impossible odds. Time passed in a blur of negotiations, repairs, and the occasional bout of mistrust. But with each passing day, the Ringworld inched closer to stability. Systems flickered back to life, power hummed through long-abandoned corridors, and the air felt just a little more breathable. Malik found himself in the guts of the place, elbow-deep in machinery that looked as old as the universe. You know, I was really hoping I'd retire without having to play space electrician. Retirement's for quitters, Zara said, her voice crackling through his comms. Besides, think of the stories you'll have to bore everyone with. If we survive, Malik replied, I'm thinking of writing a memoir. How to fix an alien Ringworld and not die trying. Catchy, Zara said. I might even read it. Conroy, overseeing the efforts from what passed for a command center, found himself surprisingly content. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was progress. The Grinash, for their part, seemed to be adapting. They still had a penchant for violence, but now it was channeled into something constructive, rebuilding what they'd once tried to destroy. "We are learning," the Grinash leader said during one of their increasingly frequent meetings. "Trust is difficult, but we will try." "That's all we can ask," Conroy replied. "Trying beats not trying any day of the week," and so the work continued. Piece by piece, the ring world began to return to life, a testament to what could be achieved when people put aside their differences and focused on a common goal. Sure, there were setbacks, arguments, misunderstandings, the occasional fight that left more dents in the walls than egos, but they kept moving forward. After what felt like an eternity but was really just a few months of hard, sweaty, thankless work, they reached a point where they could finally take a step back and see what they'd accomplished. The ring world wasn't perfect. Hell, it wasn't even that pretty, but it was functional and it was theirs. Malik, standing next to Zara and Conroy, looked out at the rebuilt sections. "It's kind of beautiful in a we didn't die sort of way." "Yeah," Zara agreed. "We might just make it after all." Conroy nodded, a rare moment of peace settling over him. "It's a start, and that's more than we had before." Virak approached, his presence a reminder of the newfound alliance. "Captain Conroy, the Grinash commend your efforts." "We are grateful." Conroy smiled, a real one this time. "Well, don't get too sappy on us. We're all still figuring this out." Virak's expression shifted into what could only be described as a grin. "Progress is acceptable." The work, of course, was never truly finished. There were always improvements to be made, systems to tweak, and tensions to manage. But for now, they had stability, and that was a victory in itself. Looking out at the ring world, Conroy felt a sense of accomplishment. They'd turned enemies into allies, chaos into order, and despair into hope. "Not bad for a crew of misfits," Malik said, summing up the sentiment perfectly. "Not bad at all," Conroy replied, feeling just a touch of pride. As the sun set over the ring world, an artificial sunset for an artificial world, the crew of the Lamentable found themselves united by something more than survival. They were part of something bigger, a step toward a future where cooperation wasn't just a dream, but a reality. In the end, it wasn't a perfect ending. Those didn't exist, but it was a good one. And sometimes, in a universe as vast and unpredictable as this, that was enough. And so, against all odds and expectations, the SS Lamentable and its crew sailed on, carrying with them the hope for a better tomorrow. Because if they'd learned anything, it was that the void of space was filled with possibilities, as long as you were willing to reach for them. With the Grinash now allies rather than adversaries, the ring world stood as a testament, not to perfection but to perseverance. It was a beginning, and in the grand scheme of things, that was all anyone could ask for. As they turned away from the ring world, ready to face whatever the galaxy threw at them next, Conroy found himself smiling again, not because they'd won, but because they'd survived. And sometimes that was the greatest victory of all.